Okay, so let's start then.
Okay, sure.
So I am very excited to talk to you. One, because on a personal level, I believe in daydreaming and hallucinations. And our topic today is hallucination versus reality. So I would like to start with one basic question. When you actually launched More Things in Heaven and Earth, it was during pandemic when the world was already mourning losses and they were kind of bordering on oblivion and delusion. So was it very specific, your launch of the book around that time?
No, actually, no, not at all. The book was scheduled to be launched in 2019. Sorry, it was 2020, and we kept pushing it forward because we hoped that things would get normal and everything would settle down. But then it got delayed for quite some time, and then I think my publishers took a call to release it because it was just getting inordinately delayed. So it's just coincidence that it happened to launch at the thick of the pandemic. It released, when I say launch, it released in April 2021, when we were in the most severe phase of the Delta wave. And yes, it was quite a scary time, that entire phase.
Okay. So especially since if I have to kind of, do a cursory level of scan after the face at the window, missing, presumed dead, this was the third of a series. So what is your inspiration behind such books or such genre, if I can be specific? When you're actually choosing to write and discuss about loss and love, the thin line between loss and love. So specifically, these three books in series, what inspires you to, talk in such an engaging and gripping manner?
I'm glad you see it as three books of a series, because while they're not of the same person or the same protagonist or the same path, it's about three women at different life stages. The first, The Face of the Window, is about Julia McNally, who is 78 years old. She's waiting to die. She's all alone. She's not your conventional protagonist. Then we have Missing Presumed Dead, in which I have Ayesha Thakur, who's in her mid-40s. She is mentally disturbed. She has a dysfunctional marriage. She's in a situation which is not ideal. And of course, she goes missing, as the title says. And the third is More Things in Heaven and Earth, which is about Kamla Malik, who is a widow at 32 and has to rebuild her life. Now, her life is made much easier because of the fact that she's come into money because her husband has passed away and left her comfortably off. But is that all? What more is there? I mean, how does she deal with the loss? And my idea was to write about women at stages in their lives which are not really spoken about too much. I did not want to write about the 20-somethings, about finding love, about discovering yourself. These are women who are grappling with issues which are very different. So if one is grappling, like Ayesha Thakur, with mental ailments and her own realization that she herself is difficult to live with, and she herself is a constraint for her husband and her children. There's Julia McNally, who's at the end of her life realizing that nobody really wants her, and she is just waiting to die, so to speak. And her own quest for identity, because she's an orphan and she doesn't really know who her parents were. And all these issues are sort of woven together in More Things in Heaven and Earth. It's widowhood. It's the phase of, a woman being a widow. And does it disempower her? Does it give her power? I try to explore all those in my books.
Yes. Also, why, if we can talk about, specifically, if we can talk about the reality of hallucinations, while the word hallucination is not, it's not perceived as very real, I think if you tend to overthink, or if you tend to self-talk, or if you tend to talk more often to get out of that loneliness, it's not really unreal. So is there a midway ground between hallucination and reality, which I see in your writing, in your fiction? What would you say on that? Because in general, specifically in India, if we also talk of women writing in general, because I've had some level of, let's say, Emily Dickinson or Agatha Christie, or even Jhumpa Lahiri. When we talk of women writing, there is a sense of, freedom and empowerment when you tend to read self-talks and thoughts. Women in general realizing their sense of belief in oneness and timing, at time not even reality. Most of such writings also largely border upon their thoughts, which do not exist in real, but they tend to kind of strengthen us as women, right? So what would you say on that midway ground between hallucination and reality that kind of, makes us stronger to perceive life in general?
What is hallucination? Hallucination is somebody else's reality, right?
Yes.
What we may think is a hallucination is reality to somebody else. It's they are living through it, they're experiencing it. And who are we to say whether it's a hallucination or it's a reality? Unless we are in their shoes and we are going through exactly what they're going through at that point of time. The mind is very complex. The mind is something that we have not even mapped, I think, a tenth of right now. Not even the mind has pathways and destinations and hidden chambers that we can't explain. So I find this very fascinating that people, there's so much research on it, alternate identities, split personalities, even hallucinations, people going into fugue states where they don't remember what they've done for days, and they've gone on to different cities and they've lived, they've had an existence independent of their original existence. I find this very interesting that the mind can split itself, and completely dissociate from one persona to another persona to another persona. And when you talk about hallucination, it's a very loaded term. Now, there is a hallucination that, comes from taking of not very kosher substances, which people seek out, for pleasure, for recreational purposes. And there are the hallucinations that come unwittingly because you have some kind of maybe a lesion in the brain or a chemical imbalance or something happening to you. And then there is this whole debate about, the holy men of past. I mean, who's to say Joan of Arc wasn't hallucinating when, God spoke to her and told her to do whatever she had to do? Who's to say that, so many of the people we revere weren't hallucinating? So sometimes hallucinations also bring a sense of purpose and direction and some sort of pathway to people. Sometimes hallucinations can take them to the other extreme. And it's fun to explore them, very honestly. And I think I try to do that in my writing. I always leave it a little open, like you're never really sure what it is. Is it reality? Is it an hallucination? I like my readers to come up with their own interpretations. I don't like to say everything fact.
Which is a very beautiful part of your work, especially if you have to categorize between, let's say, romance, parenting, and psycho thriller, maybe. Where do you see there is a bigger scope of, debating on real and hallucination? Specifically, if we talk of these three genres in your work.
I would love to say parenting because we all like to hallucinate that we are great parents, but at the end of the day, our children will give us our report cards when they grow up. No, seriously though, obviously, I think the psycho thrillers give you the great scope to play with reality and unreality, non-reality dimensions that we don't really know. Romance also can be disillusional, you can be
which is
romantic.
Yes, which is a very important part. Do you think, because this is a question which most of the authors are talked about, do you think love as a force, as an entity, has a big role to play in kind of pushing us towards hallucination or delusional mode? Sometimes love is a strength, but at times, when you're bordering between love, past, present, and desire, do you think love has a major role to play in such genres specifically for readers?
It depends on the person. I think it depends on the kind of love. I'm sorry, my voice is a little down because I've got one nasty allergy. It depends on the person reading it. It depends on your own, so many things, your childhood experiences, abandonment, attachment, sense of worth. They're all tied up in this incredible Gordian knot of what, how we respond to love. whether we seek out love for self-validation, whether we seek out the lover as an object of pleasure or an object of desire, whether we seek out some person or whether we need to be loved. Sometimes you want to be the object of
Yes.
adoration. We need that validation. So there are so many things. It all, everybody has a different need for love, but everybody needs love.
Okay.
Everybody has a different interpretation of love
In
and how they
context,
will respond
let's
to it.
say, in context to more things in heaven and earth, where you're actually talking of two things. One is loss of husband, where she's kind of moving or grappling with reality. As second, coming to terms with somebody who can be potentially interesting. There is love more of a poison, or is love more of an escape? What would you say?
That's an interesting question. More of a poison or more of an escape? I think it was more of a feeling for her, to be
Okay.
very honest. Not more of poison, more of escape. If you read the book, have you had a chance to read the book by any chance?
Yes, because I've not read the Face at the Window. That's why I wanted to have. I have read the review of Face at the Window, but now More Things in Heaven and Earth, I wanted to see if there are any, paradigms, matching paradigms, specifically because I'm a girl talking to a girl. And I wanted to know that when when you're not really in love with someone, but you are kind of, especially in pandemic, during pandemic, I've seen people moving out and marriages, divorces happening. So love is very often seen as a force of, at times that it's an escape. Also, while I say so, it's also at times something which kind of, captivates you. It becomes kind of your poison to choose, to decide at times. That decisiveness is a big thing which love kind of sometimes deludes you. That's why I asked this question.
To come back to Kamla Malik, I think yes, he did love her husband. So
Mhm.
that love was a kind of poison. If you read the book, it's a very dark
Mhm.
love from both sides. And with the darkness is why her husband continues. I mean, he haunts her in the literal sense. It's not just mental reality and hallucinations. I won't give too much away, but it's scary the way he refuses to let go of her. And by moving on, she's trying to exercise the fact that she is a living being. Her body also has needs, and she has to move on physically, mentally, emotionally. So while with her first lover, I don't think she was. It's very clear in the book she was not emotionally attached to him. It's just a body moving on. With the second, she becomes obsessed with him completely, because I think at that point she realizes that she has to cut whatever emotional attachment she had with the husband who refuses to leave her.
Yeah.
And she transfers all that longing, that passion, that desire into this object who does not want her so much in return, who is not so obsessed with her. So the poison is there. It's a poison, and she's drunk it 2 times, but I don't think she learns.
Yes. Can safely say so, yes. Also, around this genre only, what would be that one piece of advice to all the budding slash, potential authors out there, if they want to kind of, work on this genre in fiction specifically? What would be that one thing that you think will be very useful when you're talking on hallucination and reality?
Do not be constrained by what you think is reality.
Okay.
To allow yourself the freedom of imagination and put down what you think could happen. There are some scenes in the book which are very scary, which are terrifyingly scary. And if I sat down while I was writing them, while they're coming to me, I sat down to think that could this happen? Is this practical? Would this be believable? The scenes would have never been the way they are. But the fact is that you let your imagination take over and you let it go in free flow. And then let your editor, of course, please give coherent path flow and narrative and all that, don't give rubbish. But then your editor needs to decide whether it's working or not working. So don't censor yourself when you're writing out something that is in a psycho thriller or a supernatural or a surreal or a horror book. Just go with the flow, and your imagination is the best guide. Don't constrain it. I think that's what we tend to do. We tend to self-censor a lot while writing. We need to stop doing that.
Okay, that's good. That's useful. Especially, and if you kind of map your journey in literature, starting from, let's say, your blogging days to your parenting time, where have you drawn your maximum strengths from? Because as a writer also, I think you must have realized that you've matured over the years, right? So if you look back and see all the works that you've done, which have been your personal highs and lows while, writing all kinds of works?
It's really a question for me to answer. Somebody who's read my work should be able to answer better.
Specifically, just from writing perspective, not from a reader, but as somebody who's kind of grown up, evolved as a writer. Since there are many people who might be watching this, they might be influenced to write. So I am seeking some kind of dive deep inspiration from you, which is like, if you have to write constantly as a writer, you grow while managing all kinds of other responsibilities. So what do you think has been your personal highs and lows, if you can count some with us?
See, my first book was written in one shot. I was very innocent and naive at that time, and I submitted my first draft directly to the editor. It did not work. Now, each draft of my book was to at least 15 revisions before I dared even send it out to the editor.
Okay.
I just jumped to 78,000 of a manuscript because I just looked at it because it was not working. I have lost chunks. I've lost entire manuscripts, and I've had computer crashes because I'm not bothered to save Google backup. That's stupidity. I'm not advising anybody does that. But I walked through those. Those were the lows. So deleting 78,000 words, looking at the work that I've done for almost over a year, and sitting and looking at it and saying, this is not working. And not trying to salvage bits and pieces of it and say, maybe this will work. Yes, okay, I can pull this out from here. No, I just hit delete on the whole thing. Was it drastic to do? Yes, it was drastic. But I think I've come to the point as a writer where I can say that this is not the best I can do. And I think it may be foolishness, it may be courage, call it what you may, but I think that has taken me 10 years of being a professional writer of fiction to get to say that this is not working for me, this is not the best I can do, and I will get to this on this. So that is my journey today. The More Things in Heaven and Earth was around 4 years in the writing. Just in the writing. As was Face at the Window, as was Missing Presumed Dead. Now these books, and in between, of course, I keep writing multiple things. So, the other shorter, the non-fictions come out, the parenting books come out, the funny books come out. They don't take time. They take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. These take years because these are labors of love, and they're very intense, dark, emotional books. So I have another, I think you asked about the highs and lows. My highs and lows will be that I have learned how to divide myself into the books which do not, which are fun to write, which are easy, which I do like a breeze because, I find them great. I enjoy the process, and the books which torment me and torture me and, really rip my soul out. So I enjoy both the processes. So that has been a very big learning that, I don't need to confine myself to this or this or this. I can do it all.
Especially if I'm sure you must have gone through your own phases of writer's block. What kicks you out of writer's block, specifically when you are on some work which requires continuous attention?
I just deleted 78,000 words. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. It was the biggest writer's block ever. But no, I think if you call yourself a professional writer, you just get to your desk and keep writing. You don't have a surgeon going up and saying, I have surgeon's block, I'm not going to operate today. or a construction worker saying I have construction worker block today, I'm not going to. They have to do their job. People are relying on them to get their job. Nobody's relying on me to get my job done except myself. So if I don't do it, nobody's with a gun at my head saying, Kiran, you have to sit down and do your 2,000 words a day. It's up to me whether I do it or not do it. And it so happens I've realized that the muse will not come if you're waiting for the muse to come. The muse comes when you're sitting at your desk and you're doing your work. You will be plodding through one word to another word to another word, and suddenly you will just flow. That's when the muse arrives. But for that, you have to be at your desk every day and write through your writer's block. Just put one word after another word. It will start flowing. Of course, you need to take a break and take a change of scene and do all those kind of things. But my point is, don't leave your work for too long.
Are you in your entire work so far, as a reader, if we kind of read through all the works, will we find some traces of you as an individual in the protagonists out there in all the books?
Yeah, I think that's inevitable, wouldn't it be? We all, the first book they say is always autobiographical. So The Reluctant Detective, many people have said, the K. Mehra reminds them of me. She's also in the Kitty Party Murder. So I think you get yourself out of the way in the first book. Then you're free to develop your other protagonists. So bits and pieces, yes. I did work at an advertising agency like the Once Upon a Rush. I am a middle-aged woman going through menopause. Now I'm a senior citizen. Of course, when I wrote it, I was a middle-aged woman going through menopause. In the Symposium Dead. I'm not yet a 78-year-old woman waiting for death, but I've written her. But yes, I have a mother who taught at boarding school, and her experiences are a lot what I drew from. So my childhood, you could say, is listening to those stories as part of Mrs. McNally's backstory. More Things in Heaven and Earth. My protagonist is a writer. I don't think there's much of me in her. She's a very different person from me. But I think she is as internal as I am. So that's the closest that I get to her.
And what in literature only, who have been your favorite authors? Apart from seeking inspiration from real life and people, have you also been inspired by great authors, if you can count some?
I love reading. My favorite genres are horror and humor.
Okay.
So I go to those two extremes. So I love P.G. Woodhouse, Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman. I love science fiction as well. And then I love Stephen King, anything spooky, any scary books. I like you. I read a lot of science fiction. So all your Dune series, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, the classic ones right now, Ted Chiang, Neil Sixon, all of them. So these are the genres I like to read. I enjoy reading. I love reading high fantasy also, like The Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien. There's a gamut of influences actually across everything. There are the emotionally wrenching books also. So we really can't, I guess, all of us as readers, we can't say that this is the only one thing that I love to read. We read across multiple things, and I hope that it shows in my writing that, the multiple.
Yes, it does. That's why we were very selective in kind of, reserving this topic for your genre, which was hallucination versus reality. Because while we all adore a sense of oneness, reality, being very practical, at the same time, I think the divide between daydreaming and what will happen next, or mourning the loss and grappling onto something new, love, that little grayness, glorifying that grayness so beautifully shows in your work.
Thank you. It's very kind of you.
There are 2 and 3 more questions that we thought will be very useful, specifically targeting your work, which one of which is hallucination in general. Is it a refuge from loneliness, which is more dangerous? So if we have to choose between hallucination and loneliness, as an author, where would you seek refuge?
See, there's daydreaming, which is a different thing completely, and there's hallucination. So daydreaming might be a refuge of loneliness, but hallucinations are not. Hallucinations are real, it's an altered reality, right? It's caused by some chemical imbalance in your brain. It's caused by something going wrong with your inner circuitry, and it's the person is living in their own reality. So it's not an escape from loneliness. The person may be surrounded by people but still be hallucinating because that is their reality. When you're daydreaming, if you're alone, you think you're daydreaming, it is an escape, and it makes you feel good. That's beautiful, but hallucinations can be scary. Hallucinations are not nice most of the times. They're terrifying. You're hearing the voice of God talking to you. You're imagining creatures coming at you. You're imagining things that can be not very pleasant. So daydreaming is pleasant. It's nice. It's an escape. Hallucinations are not, and that's a very clear divide. And that's something that hallucinations can never be an escape. They're a terrifying alternate reality that a person does not go into voluntarily. Daydreaming can be voluntary, right?
Yes, that's true. That's true. In kind of extrapolating hallucination in psychological thrillers and romance, would you find romance in general in India, it has evolved as a genre in kind of battling anxiety, depression in the last 1 year and a half?
I would say anything that gives you solace and happiness in these times, just go for it. Personally, for me, I have sought solace in K-dramas. So I have fallen down the K-drama rabbit hole very badly because they feel good, they're nice, they're emotional, they're very well made. Similarly with books and literature, if romance gives you a kind of warm feels, happiness, what is it to say that, I don't read romance and it is beneath me as genre? There's a lot of snootiness that happens about romance. People, I don't know why, even though it's the best-selling genre across the world, there is a certain snootiness in admitting that we read romances. People want to be seen reading or known reading more literary work and more highbrow work. I say whatever gives you joy, read it. If something literally gives you joy, please read it. If something that is a quick, fast, feel-good romance with a lot of emotional moments and makes you feel, gives you the catharsis you desire, please read it. And these times, given how the situation has been for the past couple of years for the entire world, I would say we grab our happiness wherever we get it because we deserve it, or we're living through a pandemic.
Yes, sure. Says, I would like to kind of, wrap it up with one word coming from you, specifically somebody who wants to have a more profound sense of reality, find a purpose in life amid everything. What would be that one word of advice from you to all the readers out there?
One word of advice, one word is tough. So I would say kindness.
Okay. Kindness, be kind to one and all.
Be kind, give kindness, expect kindness. That's everybody is fighting a tough battle. We don't know their battles. We are very quick to get annoyed, outraged. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I keep outraging on Twitter all the time, and I've only now learned to tone it down a bit. Everybody's fighting different battles. I think if we're all kinder to each other, we can deal with this reality better. We hopefully should not go into daydreaming. So let's be kind to each other.
Okay, that's wonderful.